this is like the mid 90s. So it's like really the tail end of the rave scene. And I noticed your logo kind of reminded me of this. It's like in the rave scene in the early 90s, the happy face from the 70s had a revival, and it was really popular. And that was the source of the Devilman logo, was the happy face from the 70s.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jesse Nyberg Podcast. Today I'm here with Marc Mckee. Super excited to talk to him. He's the kind of mastermind behind a bunch of cool skate graphics, World Industries, Blind, a bunch of other stuff. And how you doing, man?
Good, thanks. How's it going?
Not bad. What have you kind of been up to this past week?
Not a whole lot. Not really up to anything. I'm just trying to get a few things started. But nothing to really mention just yet.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because you were out of town, right? We rescheduled. You were on a little snowboarding trip or something?
Yeah, I went up to Mammoth and did some snowboarding and then came back and then had a little further delay because there's been a lot of rain down here. My neighbor had some roof damage, so they were getting that repaired. And so there's a lot of construction noise going on. But at this time of day, it's gone. So I think we're good for the interview.
Yeah, for sure. Do you do... like when you're either drawing or painting, like creating art, what time of day do you usually like to do that kind of stuff?
Definitely not a morning person. Yeah. Sometimes it takes me a long time to get started, like especially after the pandemic hit, like things got like really exacerbated, like in terms of like when my start times would be. Sometimes I don't get started till like 9 o'clock at night, but then I'll work a full day after that, into the night. So yeah, definitely not before noon, I would say. I would not get started doing anything.
Yeah. When you were working in like a more structured role, like at like World or at the companies, did you have trouble ever working?
I had a salary job for years and years and years. And I worked a normal, well, at the very beginning I was freelance, but working still like 40 or more hours a week at the company, like in the late 80s and early 90s. Then it became a salary job where I would, get in by 10 in the morning and then work till like 7 or 8 at night or later. But then even sometimes when like things got really ramped up, I would go work really early in the morning. So
yeah,
I don't know. Like what my advice would be like for when you're young, because I think like I'm a little bit older than most of your guests. Like, take advantage of like if you're able to wake up early in the morning, like definitely do that. Because like I would wake up early in the morning and go to work, and I had my own key card to get in before everybody else. Yeah. But that only lasted for a certain amount of time.
Right. What was like I know a good amount or a decent amount about kind of some of the stuff you did at World and when you were in skateboard graphics, and I was listening to the other interview you did with the 9 Club and talking about the Brother magazine and stuff, but I was kind of curious, what's your background just as like an artist? What made you want to get into this kind of field in the first place? Well,
I had always been into drawing like as a kid. Which I think is like pretty common, like among like little kids, like they like drawing. So that's what I did. And then also like I had the benefit of like my mom as a hobby, she painted. So that definitely helped out. Like I think I even took some extracurricular classes, even when I was like, 5 or 6 years old, like, working with paints and stuff. And then I would always take art classes in high school. And then we had this thing in high school where you could get like, to get credits like to get into college. In order for art classes to count, they would have to have a certain number of like things you could tick off in terms of what the courses like consisted of, like spelling or there was some kind of criteria where like you could get like your GPA could get boosted in art class by taking like getting good grades in art class. So that helped me get into college, taking the art classes throughout high school. And I was even like excused from taking certain required classes in high school because like you had to take trigonometry. And for some reason, the art class conflicted in time schedule with that. So I never took trig, even though I was able to get into calculus, which I think trig was probably a requirement for. But yeah, I took art classes throughout high school. And then my mom worked at the shopping mall in my neighborhood. Like I grew up in this town called Terra Linda, which is a suburb of San Rafael in Northern California. So she worked at the mall for the management company that collected rent from all the proprietors. So I would get jobs doing sign painting for the stores there.
Oh, that's cool. And that was when you were pretty young doing that, the sign painting?
Yeah, 14, 15 years old maybe.
That's cool. Yeah, that's pretty funny that they let you, they're just like, all right, well, he has painting class at this time. He doesn't have to go to math. Like, that's pretty nice. I feel like I know a lot of people that would like to have that instead of doing the extra math class. Obviously, then, if you had this kind of background and you were kind of creative and drawing and painting throughout, seems like most of your life, what was the transition like? And how did you get started with the skateboard graphics?
Well, I started out skating probably in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And then I got into BMX bike riding, which was hugely popular in Northern California. Yeah. And then from there, I got a sponsorship in riding BMX bikes, doing trick riding. And then eventually moved to Southern California to go to college, where I started at UCLA to major in design. And then that's a good school to go to, but one of my other motivations was just because that was the epicenter of the freestyle bike riding scene in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And so then I met in with this group of friends, and then one of them started a bike company that I worked for. Mm-hmm. And then he knew some pro skaters, and then that's how I transitioned into doing skateboard graphics.
Okay. Was the first stuff that you started, was the first company that you started doing stuff for Blind and World, or was there quite a bit of stuff you're doing before then?
Well, I guess a big part was the freestyle bike riding company was called Bully Bikes. So I started there in 1988. The owner was named R.L. Osborne. And so he was the top pro in the 80s. His dad started they practically invented the genre of freestyle bike riding, because his dad was Bob Osborne. And then with the name Osborne, they named their publishing company. He had started a magazine. So they named their publishing company Wizard Publications. And so then R.L. Robert Lewis was his son, who was the top pro. Then Wendy Osborne was his sister, which was the top, the photo editor, top photographer for the magazine. The magazine was called BMX Action. And they started another magazine called Freestyling. And so R.L. was featured in the magazine. His dad was the publisher. And they first employed a bunch of people in skateboarding too. So that was in the mid 80s. And then RL branched off on his own. That scene kind of died out in the late 80s. And so then RL started his own company, Bully Bikes, in 88, which I did graphics for a full year, maybe a year and a half. And then RL was friends with Steve Rocco and Rodney Mullen, these pro skaters from the 80s. Mm-hmm. Freestyle discipline. Yeah. And then Steve started his own company, World Industries, originally under a different name called Santa Monica Airlines Rocco Division, or SMA Rocco Division. And so then I just started doing graphics for them. They had been around for a year before I worked for them, but then I just moved on over to their company.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like from just what I've read online and looking at kind of the history of the company, you were there from basically the beginning and helped kind of what you were doing and your style was kind of establishing their identity, as a skateboard company in terms of the graphics. And that's what I think. I wanted to ask you about next was when you were working there, you obviously did a lot of like wild shit and pretty controversial graphics that I think were like super impressive and also probably shocking or whatever to some people at the time. When you were there, did you feel that there was any part of you that like wasn't allowed to do something, or was that you pushing it like all the way with some of the like, you know, stuff with like Satan and things like that?
Yeah, there was like really no limitations, especially looking back on things now. Being older, I wouldn't probably do a lot of the same stuff I did back then. Not that I would discourage other people from doing it, but like just, I just wouldn't do it now. So yeah, there's such a lot of freedom.
Yeah. So you wouldn't say that like there was anything that was kind of too far back then? Whatever you were doing, they were kind of just all right with it?
No, not really. I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I heard you talking about how some of the writers, like they weren't very like fond of some of the graphics that you'd present sometimes.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's like one of the things that I would say now that I wouldn't do. Like I wouldn't put somebody's name on like a crazy graphic without getting their approval, which is what we did back then. And at the time, like the writers, a lot of them didn't care because like, you know, they're so young and they're having this like kind of like dream job of getting a paycheck for writing skateboards. And, you know, they don't really consider the ramifications of like, you know, having their name affixed to like a certain kind of like content.
Right.
But then at a certain point, I think that some of them did take notice and they thought like, well, you know, we could, you know, Rocco was a skateboarder. He started his own company. We're skateboarders. Like maybe we should just do our own fucking thing that we like and that we're in control of. So I think that may have been a factor of like kind of some of the I don't know, like people leaving the company.
Yeah. It's interesting looking at some of the older decks like that you've done and the evolution of like what you were doing. And then once some of the characters like Devilman and stuff got introduced, like it seemed like they were just really pushing the like the character decks rather than the non-pro models, or rather than the pro models, I mean.
Yeah, that's what happened. Like just on a fluke, like I came up with those characters, and then those graphics started selling more than the boards with the writers' names attached, because like the writers didn't like the character graphics. They were very like more youth oriented, and then at a certain point, World Industries we decided to start a new brand for the writers that had been on World Industries that didn't like the character boards. And that was called Deca. So then they got their own brand, which didn't really last that long, but the characters just perpetuated and continued. And then we had a new crop of writers that liked the success of the characters, that wanted to be associated with them. And then that went into like the early 2000s.
Yeah. So it's kind of two sides of the spectrum with how the writers felt about those character decks rather than what you were doing before.
Yeah, it was a generational thing, because like, you know, there was a definite like, you know, success of the brand before the characters, and that's what a lot of people latched onto. And then once it transitioned to the characters, like they didn't want a part of that, even though it was kind of phasing out with, you know, the kids. Like they couldn't relate to the earlier stuff anymore, or maybe it was because like skateboard shops didn't want to deal with the controversial content anymore.
Because I remember hearing that. So when the shops would order the decks, it'd be like, okay, we want 20 of these Rodney Mullen decks. They wouldn't even know like what the graphic was, right? Until you guys produced it.
Yeah, we would even have catalogs that just said new, like Ron Chapman board coming soon, and there'd just be a shape of the graphic with that type written in there. Like that's like so. presumptuous to assume that like somebody's going to order your product when you just said, just coming soon, and like, how many do you want?
It'd be funny to actually get that printed, like whatever that design looked like, saying like the deck graphic here or whatever, like put it on the actual board. When did the process for you change at all in the way you were doing either the screen printing or the drawing of the boards, when the styles shifted from some more of the like bigger like fish type shaped decks to like the modern skateboard like design?
Yeah, it had to have changed a lot. Yeah, I think I talked about this on the 9 Club, where like at first, like all the boards were shaped differently. Like Rodney Mullen would design the shape with the skater. Mm-hmm. And, it's a big deal. Like, oh, this is like a new nose shape, or they didn't change the concave that much, but like, yeah, they would have the exact template, the contour of the board. So you get that, and you could just draw within those parameters. But then somewhere along the lines, it just changed to the modern popsicle shape. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, at first you get the exact shape. You just draw within the exact shape. Mm-hmm. Then it didn't really matter so much. Well, there was a small blip in time where there was these slick bottom graphics, where it was a separate ply of just plastic that was printed. It was a sublimation process where they would somehow transfer the artwork into this plastic sheet. And then when they pressed the board, when they actually pressed all the plies in the mold to make the skateboard before it got cut out, they would apply this plastic layer with the graphic on it. So they couldn't align that perfectly in the pressing process. So you'd have to draw excess or paint excess graphic that would be later trimmed off. So I think I complained about that in the 9 Club interview, where like you just knew that like part of the graphic would be trimmed off, and you had to draw that anyway, just in case, the way that was positioned. I think the first company that made slick bottom graphics was Santa Cruz. And so their solution to the problem was just like theirs were called Everslicks, and it was like the logo Everslick was the graphic of the board, and it was purposely cut off so that no matter how it was positioned irregularly, it looked fine, because that's the part of the concept, like it was cut off.
So they kind of made you like account for this bleed, and you were knowing that part of the design was going to get cut off, so it was kind of like a bummer at that point.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about the idea behind Devilman and Flameboy and Wet Willie came from this concept of you getting like a lower rate or like a set rate for the graphics, right? So you wanted to come up with stuff that would take less time. Was that the original idea?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't think it specifically caused me to come up with that idea, but I don't know, like I felt the need to come up with ideas that were really simplistic, because like before I could work for like 2 or 3 weeks on a graphic at a time, and then in order to like get the same rate with a new hourly rate, I thought like, hey, I gotta finish this thing in a week or less than that in order to make the same amount of money to like pay the rent. And so then like another thing with those graphics is this is like the mid 90s, so it's like really the tail end of the rave scene. And I noticed your logo kind of reminded me of this. Is like in the rave scene in the early 90s, the happy face from the 70s had a revival, and it was really popular. And that was the source of the Devilman logo, was the happy face from the 70s. And yeah, just really easy to draw and easy for people to like relate to and identify with.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if you look at a lot of those rave flyers all through like Europe and LA and New York, they use the, happy face in all kinds of things and pill shapes and like repeating patterns and whatnot. So I never really thought about connecting it like that with the Devilman, but
yeah, it's like
kids like
emoji.
Being able to redraw it, that's like one of their favorite part. Yeah, I wonder the purple like just devil emoji, I mean, like I wonder if that would even be looking that way without you creating that.
it's just like one of those things that's inevitable. Like, I mean, there was already emojis like in the 70s before computers, so like it had to be.
And then you created the Devilman, right? And then you were like, all right, well, we got to give him these sidekicks, basically. And that's where it was Flameboy first, right? And then Wet Willie after.
Flameboy first, and then Wet Willie.
Did you notice like the, I guess, success of that? Was it pretty instant, or did it take a while for like the consumer or audience to kind of adjust to these new styles?
I guess it was probably pretty instant in terms of just like being, less than 6 months or so because I don't think we would have done the Wet Willie character if the other Devilman and Flameboy boards were successful, and then the Wet Willie character came like 6 months later. So yeah, like I think we definitely took notice and then went with it.
And then they pretty much, like, I feel like a good mark of knowing that was working well is they changed the whole like logo, right? What did it even look like before the Devilman was part of it?
Pretty much like right before then, another art director in our company, John Thomas, real name, JT, who was once pro for Alva. He came on later to work at World in the early 90s as art director. He had done a Globe logo that had like the smiley face on it too, but like it had more like cartoonish eyes, not a emoji style so much. And this is like a really obscure fact. The face that he used for that Globe logo, it's like a picture of the Earth. The face was taken from the Kellogg's Raisin Bran cereal logo. I think it was on the sun, maybe.
Oh, okay. Like did it have the sunglasses?
No, it had open eyes.
I know,
but a smile, and had these weird like arrow points on the edge of the smile. But yeah, I think that was the sun from the Kellogg's Raisin Bran cereal. So that was the logo before the Devilman logo.
When I was looking at some of the other decks that you were doing a lot before those characters were introduced, was the Mike V like farm one? Was that one of like the most popular graphics that you've created for them?
Yeah, definitely. That was the first graphic I did in '89 ever, and then we did and then with this new company, Street Plant, we did a revamped version in 2019 of the Barnyard. But yeah, that was cool. One of the most popular graphics back at the time.
Were you limited at all in layers, like in the printing process? Because that one has like some super vibrant neons and things.
Yeah, I think that one probably had maybe 7 or 8 colors. But what we would do with the inks is they're fluorescent inks, and they're transparent, so you can overlap them to make different blends. So you could start out with like just yellow, magenta or pink, and then cyan. And then from there you could make orange, purple with the cyan and the magenta, green with the yellow and the cyan, and then even brown with all 3, yellow, pink, and blue overlapped. And so you could get like, I don't know, that'd be over 10 colors probably with all the blends. And then another big deal was when Sean Cliver came over to World, another artist that worked at World Industries. He originally worked at Powell Peralta, but he was fired from Powell in 1991, and then Rocco hired him to work for World because like they were our major competitor back then. Part of Rocco's strategy was to like hire people or take writers from other companies. Yeah. And so what Sean did at Powell was they had this process of using transparent black, which was really gray. So it was a transparent grayish ink, which is like a watered down black. And then you could overlay that additionally over all the other colors to make a darkened, darker tinted color.
Like for shadows and stuff, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Is the process from when you started to now with the printing, is it very different?
Well, yeah, now everything is this heat transfer process, which is a different way of applying the graphic to the board. So, like some companies will say like, yeah, well, the heat transfers are silk screen, which they are. They're a silk screen process onto a sheet of plastic, and that's basically and becomes an iron-on, and so the plastic with the artwork applied to it gets passed through some hot rollers, I think, and then the deck is, it's applied to the deck, and then it passes through the hot rollers or the rollers to transfer the ink to the deck. So then with the heat transfer, you can get like a really, photographic image applied.
Right.
Whereas you couldn't really do that with a silkscreen board.
Yeah, like the FA decks, they do like the yearbook photos that you wouldn't really be doing that. I feel like with the screen printing, same way at least.
Yeah, you could try, but it would never quite approximate how detailed it would look with the heat transfer.
Yeah, I was doing some kind of research too, and I heard you also talking about how when the company was kind of at its peak in world, I think it was over like 30 million, right? It sold for or something like that.
Yeah, I got this wrong on the Nightclub interview, but it sold for 41 million, I think, is the official number.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
And do you feel
that was
that
World, and it was a bunch of other brands that World owned and distributed, but
oh, okay. Do you feel like considering they're paying you like 600, right? Was it per graphic or something like that?
Not at that point, no. I was doing really well at that point, so
okay.
I got no complaints at all.
Okay, cool. Because I remember trying to like kind of connect the dots, hearing you say, I designed these things for 600 a graphic, and then hearing that, I was like, damn, like those characters made them so much money. I feel like you got screwed. Yeah.
That was definitely not the case. Like things turned around, and so like World was sold just to an investment bank company or some venture capitalists like in '97, and then Steve, for the employees, like including me and JT, like he had like this, in case like the complete company is sold, which was what happened with Globe with the big ass deal in 2002. There were stock options. So it's like with stock options, it's like the conditions are like, if you stay with the company, you'll get this much stock for this many years, and then it'll increase as the years go by. And then finally you can cash out like when the company is sold. So
okay,
it was beneficial to all.
I just remember like looking at everything and I was like, damn, this doesn't feel right. Like I hope he didn't get fucked over, like trying to connect all the dots, Because I feel like there's a lot of, artists and designers I've seen that create these super successful intellectual properties. Like obviously they don't know what they're going to become in the creation. Like you're not creating something usually knowing like this is going to be the Nike logo or whatever, but it's crazy to hear stories like that.
Yeah. In the case of the Nike logo, I heard that was the case. Like the designer got paid very little.
It was like $300 or some shit, which is, I heard they went back and I guess to an extent did it right. They gave her some kind of golden Nike pin or something, and it's like she gets anything forever, pretty much, like unlimited, but that's still probably a fraction of what that is worth.
Yeah.
What was with Blind, were you working there simultaneously with the World Industry stuff, or did that come after or before? I wasn't sure on that timeline.
Yeah, it was all at the same time. I mean, it's basically like different brands under the same ownership, so
right,
the same company.
Right. Do you think that the Devilman and Flameboy characters kind of paved the way for diving deeper into that style with Blind, with all the different skeleton character?
Yeah, with the Blind Reaper character, like at that point, it was basically a formula. Like you come up with a cartoon character as a mascot of your brand, and you go with it regardless of the writer personalities and identities. Like you pretty much tailor the company to that character.
Yeah.
And then I try to like have a different color scheme with blind. Like with world characters, it was like the primary colors. Like Devil Man is red, and then Flame Boy is yellow, and Willie is blue.
Right.
With the Reaper, it was more black and white, and maybe a little bit of navy in there, like dark blue. But
yeah, a lot of more neons too, like these greens and stuff. I'm looking at some of them right now. Is the character that you kind of drew a lot of the pro riders in that kind of style too? It looks like with the big fat head and things. That looks fun.
Yeah, we kind of ripped off South Park there for a while with blind.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys get I know you said that a lot of times the companies would kind of just tell you like cut it out or whatever, like the intellectual property was, but because a lot of this stuff, you know, is either parody or kind of like some kind of relation to things that existed. Did any of them ever turn out like very bad where you got like sued or anything like that?
Well, we did get away with a lot of copyright infringement early on. Probably the worst case was that we got busted for was with ripping off the Winnie the Pooh character from Disney. And that didn't happen until we made snowboards, like in the mid 90s or maybe 98, 97. Because I had done a graphic for Rocco in 89 with the Winnie the Pooh character, and it had Winnie the Pooh like dressed as like a devil character with horns and a goatee and pitchfork. And there was no repercussions from that at all, like in the 80s for the board. Then we put it on a snowboard, and then there was a Disney case, and we paid out of court. You know, like I think we had an out of court settlement that we had to pay them, which was like $60,000 or something like that.
Oh, okay. I think I heard you talking about that, and you said that you guys could have got away with it, but the graphic was called like Pooh or something like that.
Yeah, like in our paperwork, it was itemized or inventoried as the Pooh Devil with, you know, Pooh, and like, yeah, if you're going to rip off a character from another company, don't put it in your records as the company's character's name.
Yeah,
and that was like the death knell.
Yeah, that's so funny that like I'm sure whoever was the lawyer was stoked when they found that. They're like, oh well, they can't say shit about this one. How much of the boards like that you designed do you still have, or do you have a storage or anything like that?
Yeah, I saved pretty much like one of each board maybe until the early 2000s, and then I stopped because it was just that was when I like to say the quality or the quantity started exceeding the quality of the artwork, so there was just no point in saving every single one.
Yeah, and I mean it's like looking at your portfolio and just like the chronological catalog, you'd need like a whole house, it seems like, just for hosting all these boards. Besides you, who do you think was kind of putting out some of the best graphics at the time, and did you have any friends and stuff at that time that were doing the same thing as you?
Yeah, like well, Cliver and me have a really parallel career trajectories. Like we're just born like a month apart, and then he started at Powell in '89, and I started like a few months after that, and and he's probably more active nowadays still with his company Strangelove. I'm kind of slowing down with my output, but yeah, definitely Sean. And then I don't know, just over the years gotten to work with like so many people. Like Mark Gonzalez was a major influence, even though like, you know, I don't have a very similar style at all as his, but just in terms of like creative outlook, like, you know, like sometimes you can get influenced by things that like, you know, don't relate to you at all, and it just has a huge impact.
Yeah. Do you what's your kind of output or like daily work life like now? Like do you do mostly personal art, or do you take on a lot of like big commissions and things?
Yeah, like I've worked on a few things recently, but it's just like really slowed down quite a bit. Like I started painting more recently, and that's gotten me a little bit more stoked on actually doing work.
Mm-hmm.
I did a thing with to benefit a skater, Alan Losi. Like that was like kind of a fundraiser type thing. So things like that.
Yeah. And when was it that you created those cliche like kind of oil painting boards?
The portraits of the soccer players.
Yeah.
I think that was maybe 2014, 2013. And the thing that I really relished about that project was like I brought my paints to work. So like I didn't have an easel, but I set up the illustration board against my computer monitor. It's like I'm not even using my computer to like my external monitor at all. I'm just using that as a backdrop or a backrest for the illustration board. And I painted like a lot. I painted I think one of them at home, but it took me like maybe 4 weeks to finish all 6 of them. I guess it was maybe longer.
Yeah.
But those were acrylic on the illustration board.
Oh, acrylic. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. They had like, it was cool to see those because, they're pretty different compared to a lot of the stuff that I've seen you do. And it was like, it just showed that you have like some mad talent in many different styles.
Yeah. It was going back to like the stuff in the early 90s for sure.
Yeah.
I just like the fact that like I'm in this office block working with acrylic paint. Like that's probably not really a whole lot of that going on at that point in time.
Yeah, for sure. Do you do, so is a lot of the stuff you do then now revolved around skateboarding, more selective and kind of like special things that you kind of want to design?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work with people that I've known for years and years. Like I did a board for Jesse Martinez, who was he was a skater for Powell. Then he came to skate for World and actually was part owner of World for a little while in the early 90s and 80s, or the late 80s. So I did a graphic for him. And then there's a board coming out now for Nodis Copas that I did, who I've known since, like early 90s. He's the one that I did the Satan board for.
Yeah. That's dope. I remember hearing you talk about how it was for Jason Lee, right? Before? Is that what it was? And he had to change the letters on the Satan board?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I imagine like, especially in that time period, that was when people were probably like pretty, like stuff was a lot more like controversial, and I feel like people got away with a lot more, but I think there's always been something around like that imagery where people are like, I don't know if this is going to work well with like my audience or whatever.
Yeah, with the whole like satanic imagery, like the apex of like the controversial nature of that was like in the 80s. They had this thing called the Satanic Panic within metal music. Where they had the Ozzy track where they thought it was like telling you to commit suicide, and there's a Judas Priest song or something about they had congressional hearings about that's crazy. What gave rise to the parental advisory sticker or label on records back then, like because they thought there were satanic messages in music.
Yeah, I remember they with like NWA and all that stuff too, like helped pave the way for them putting all the parental advisories on everything because everyone was scared of their kids listening to cuss words or whatever it was. It's funny to think about like what like the government or like the state censors and what they don't and what they think's bad and isn't. Like I feel like it's kind of weird, their threshold for like what they allow and what they don't.
Yeah, and in the end, like I saw this thing with Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue. He's like, let me get this straight. You're telling me that I have to put a label on my record saying this contains explicit lyrics? like hell yeah. Like that's gonna make record sales go way up.
Yeah, that's funny.
Which it did.
What do you feel about, I guess, the current state of like a lot of the skateboard graphics?
Well, I don't know. I just don't have. I haven't really paid that much of attention to like what's going on. I'm sure there's like a lot of like really dope stuff happening. I'm just like too out of the loop to even make a comment. Like,
okay, that's fair. I just feel like from what I've seen, like there's a few companies that I've seen doing some cool stuff, but it seems like a lot of the stuff you were doing and in the 90s and 2000s, it felt a lot more I guess like artful, for lack of a better word. There was a lot more, seems like, risks being taken and experimental things. And I think going back to what you're saying about the heat transfer, like I'm sure the quality just in general was actually quite higher back then.
Yeah, and one other thing, I mean, I suck at skating, but I can see that like now you can express yourself like skating like so much more than back then. I think there's like such a wide array of tricks and like terrain and just different like disciplines of skating. And, you know, back then it was like way more limited. You know, things were just getting invented. So a lot of the creativity was in the graphics, but now it's like skateboarding is just like wide open, and like I think like that's all you need in some regards. Like there's just so much more you can do on skateboard.
That's a good point. I mean, it's harder to look at the graphic when they're like hitting tray flips rather than just basic like stuff that was going on back then. How different was it working with like, you know, Big Brother magazine versus like what the stuff you're doing with skateboard graphics? Did you have an entirely different position there?
Well, it was all going on at the same time, but it was a different position. It was, you know, editing articles and traveling and doing page layout. So that was different than drawing, but it was all with the same people in the same building. Yeah, so it was one and the same, I guess. Yeah, and actually with Big Brother, like, you know, there were like more provocative graphics that we started out with in the company, like in the early 90s. And then that ran its course to where like the shops, skateboarding started becoming more popular again. There actually, maybe it wasn't becoming more popular, but like there was more companies like World coming on board, like New Deal, that weren't like owned by non-skaters. You know, they were skater run. So then we had some more competition in that regard. So then, you know, people had other options than to buy like the Not a Satan board. So they could buy like a New Deal board or like a Think board or a Real board. So we had to tone down the graphics. But then we channeled that like negativity into Big Brother, or you know, not purely negative, but like the controversial nature of stuff that we did into the magazine.
Right. I remember you talking on the 9 Club about it was like the banana bread graphic. You guys like ripped off the, I think, was it Thrasher or Trans World or something that was doing like the cooking articles?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it was super fun working with that like early kind of publication design magazine stuff, because it seemed like you're able to just kind of put some risky stuff in there. And was it hard to design and edit when you guys were doing the thing where it was like a different format every time?
Well, by then there was desktop publishing, so everything was done on the computer. I mean, it would have been a nightmare if it was done. I don't even know the process. They had like a slide projector or something where they project the photographs onto like and then physically lay in the printed out type. I don't know how they did it back in the 80s, but you know, it wasn't that much more difficult. You know, slightly more difficult than it would have been if it was the same size every issue, but it wasn't a big deal. Right.
Did you feel that because it was the Big Brother magazine, you said it was bought by the guy that owned like Hustler, right? Was it?
Yeah, Larry Flint.
Okay. Was that when that kind of happened, did you feel that you kind of got out of there at the right time, right after it was bought, or do you feel that you could have stayed on there for a little bit longer?
No, I think that was like the right time, because we didn't think it'd ever get sold to anybody. And that was even a kind of a really lucky thing, because we had another publication called Blunt, which is a snowboard magazine that we acquired from DC Shoes in like 94 or 95. And Flint really had their eye on that magazine because snowboarding was really becoming more popular like around that time in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And then we said, no, you have to take Big Brother also with the deal. And so that was just like extreme stroke of luck to have sold it at that time.
Yeah. Do you, I guess I know you spoke about it early on in the podcast about you kind of working later in the day and having this kind of, your schedule varies with especially with the pandemic and everything. But for the most part, do you try to set up time to like create art every day?
Not at this point, no. I really reached a burnout point a couple of years ago. And now I think I'm actually getting more back into the swing of things.
Okay.
And what I found is like once I get into a project, then I'll work like as long as it takes to finish something. But just getting projects started is like really hard for me nowadays. Like I have to have like to get motivated, like I have to like wait for the right time, I guess. And then once it gets going, then things start, I get more productive.
Yeah. I found that that's the case with a lot of people. Like this idea of, you know, like writer's block or creative block isn't so much like once you're in it, you're like, I don't know what to do next, or I don't have an idea. It's the actual act of like, all right, let's do it. You know, we have to do the first like stroke or the first whatever you're working on. That's sometimes like the hardest obstacle to get over.
Yeah, creative block is a real big deal. Like, I don't know, just things come in waves, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you got burnt out at some point, considering the just like sheer volume of stuff you've created over your life. Like at some point, ideas, you know, probably come farther in between when you've done so many of the things you've thought of.
Yeah, like if I could impart anything, it's just like to tell people like, you know, there is like creative block is a real thing, and just wait it out, I guess.
Do you ever feel that, because you kind of cleared up some of the ideas I had about how you were like compensated and things with like all the success with World and stuff. Did you ever feel like once you were out of like the big kind of spike in popularity in skateboarding that you'd kind of just relax and like step away from that stuff for a while?
Well, I think that's probably where I'm at right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you plan on just like, I guess if you wanted to, you could kind of just do your own thing from here on out?
Yeah, but like, I don't know, the one thing great about working in skateboarding is you like a lot of things are collaborative. And so I still want to do stuff like that in collaboration with other people in skate.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But other than that, I really appreciate you just taking the time to come on and talk with me. I know we had some issues with the construction and everything, but really appreciate it, man. It was nice to finally meet you.
Great, thanks.
All right, everyone, you can check out Marc's work on Instagram and his website, marcmckee.com, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.